Welcome on to Searching for Mana, Georg Ludviksson.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Georg is the Chief Executive Officer and founder at Meniga. Meniga were founded in 2009. We are incredibly excited to have you on the show. The business is now at a scale that will be incredibly interesting to cut up. They've raised 40 million or so plus dollars, 100 or so plus staff in the business, or there or thereabouts. Mission statement-ish, but Georg will do this better than me, is we help banks to drive customers' engagement and develop new business. Headquartered in London, Georg also has an incredibly interesting background that we'll go into. A computer science graduate originally, founded a few businesses now, and really interesting to go into the different businesses and the things that Georg learnt from those experiences, and then took an MBA at Harvard Business School. So we have a number of guests who've, since taking MBAs, careers has gone in an upward trajectory. I'm not sure if we've had anyone from Harvard Business School, so we're going to discuss that too. Georg, if you could introduce the audience to what you and Meniga are up to right now, please.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm really excited to be here on the show. So, yeah, my name is Georg Ludviksson. I'm, as you said, originally a software engineer, but one turned tech entrepreneur. And Meniga is the third company that I start. And in my early businesses, I was one of the lead software developers. But then I figured the business side and learned that sales and marketing was more important for success than the tech side. Of course, you need both, but that's kind of also statistically just more important when you look at a portfolio of companies. So for the past 15 years or so, I've been on the sales, marketing, business side of things. And yeah, I mean, I'm always been interested in innovation on the intersection of finance and technology. My last startup that I started in Boston in the US was about social investing, so helping people learn stock investing, and had some other interesting angles. But when I was there, and this was at the same time I was doing my MBA at Harvard, there was a new generation of personal finance applications emerging. Companies like Mint.com, Wesabe, GCO, others, and as an area I was super passionate about. When I moved back to Europe after my studies for family reasons, I kind of brought with me this idea to start a Europe-centric personal finance software company. So that was the start of Meniga. But I had many interests. I'd actually taken a job at a hedge fund, and I was due to start in October 2008. But then the financial crisis hit, and that job wasn't there anymore. And then I made a very swift decision to join a bank in my native Iceland that was particularly hard hit by the crisis at the time. Yeah. And I think I signed with them 3 days before the bank collapsed. I showed up for work for a few days, but I didn't really work anything. But I witnessed this bank's collapse from the inside, which was quite dramatic and something I will never forget. So then I figured, okay, there are some subtle hints here that this is not the best time to career switch into finance at the time. So I went back to my idea, and that was what Meniga was born. So you can say it was born out of this financial crisis, and so we were pioneers of personal finance management software in Europe, and one of the early choices we made that was to work with banks. So we figured, let's not launch our own website or app. This naturally belongs inside digital banking. And that was our core message to banks, that to stay relevant and close to your customers, your digital bank has to evolve from a place where you're just transacting, paying bills, moving money, into more of a financial coach type user experience. So that's been our mantra all along, and it's only now in the last few years when that's become obvious to most banks that that's what they need to do. They need to evolve and rapidly upgrade digital banking to compete with the neobank. So that's what we are today. We're an innovation partner to banks. We are part of the open banking ecosystem. We are the ones helping the banks challenge the challengers or catch up with them and upgrade their digital banking into a kind of a broader financial coach type user experience as opposed to a transactional banking application.
So I want to fire into some specifics in the space. Before I do that, just the one final question on Meniga before then we detail it later in the show is, I understand what the offering is, but in what way are you specifically helping the banks with their marketing, with their business developing, with their innovation, with enabling?
Yeah, so we're primarily a software company. So we are selling software to banks. Basically, best way to think of it are building blocks to build better digital banking. So we are not doing core banking, but our software connects to core banking and credit card systems and other bank systems, and then enriches that data in various ways, categorizes it, connects it to a merchant database, and then most of it is we power different kind of use cases. Many of those use cases you can label as personal finance management. That means budgeting, financial planning, goal setting, peer comparison, seeing how your money kind of your financial behavior compares with that of peers. But also other ones, like now there's a big shift to savings as an example. There's also a lot of interest in the environment. So one of our use cases is helping people understand their carbon footprint. So that's one of the enrichments we do with transactions.
And Georg, do you look at what solutions are needed in your view, and then start creating these concepts for the client, or are you pulling the feedback from the client and what their demands are, and then, as you say, you're the building block and the technology for them, or both?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely both. I mean, the company is founded on a higher purpose, if you will, of helping people lead better financial lives. That's a deep conviction of mine that basically money management and financial behavior and literacy is one of the main topics of our times. This is more than a third of people in the rich world live paycheck to paycheck. Financial behavior and financial literacy is kind of surprisingly low to when you look at surveys. And I think just the quality of life of so many people could be so much better if they had a rainy day fund or behaved a bit differently. But it's a really, really challenging topic. So that's a very strong higher purpose that our kind of employees and the noble mission that we are on. But then our business is kind of developing solutions there that are helping both the banks and their customers in this way and deliver it through digital banking.
Yeah, I see that from our perspective, where earlier on in people's career, if they haven't managed their finances as well as they might be able to, then they're making career decisions based on incredibly short-term perspective. And actually this is, and by the way, that's not always, the point is that's not always their fault, right? This is what your mission is to try and educate these individuals about how just even a small amount of savings could mean that you're not looking at what role to take for the next month, 2 or 3. You're looking at, right, over the next year, 2 or 3, this would be the best thing for my career. This is what I would enjoy. This is what I would resonate with. And that's the better way to make career decisions at any stage. And so that's one thing that
or to start a business. If you have a buffer and can survive without salary for some time, that's a great way to start a business.
Exactly. So it's something that I think, I'm sure everybody's felt previously, but certainly over the last several years, a lot of my peers, a lot of people who run businesses, a lot of people in finance, a lot of people in search are really pushing on this point. So hopefully all the innovation is going to keep making progress. So it's great that that's part of what your mission is. In terms of, if we think about in the banks, one of the challenges is their legacy architecture. How have you seen that either develop or not develop, and therefore the opportunity to you as a business?
No, that's another good question. I think we've seen it develop enormously. I mean, it's still a big topic for banks, but I think generally speaking, most of them have made enormous progress over the past 10 years that we've been in this business. I mean, and we've literally seen everything. We power online banks, mostly in Europe, that are used by over 100 million people and work with many of the biggest banks. But and we've connected to old mainframe system for the 70s, and we've had projects where we had to call in people from retirement because there was no one that really knew the logic anymore.
Yeah.
And there was no way to get to it except to call these people out of retirement. So there've been all sorts of things. But now I think generally most banks have become much better in control of their data. It's much more common now that they're also building open banking interfaces and software APIs to partner with Meniga or other fintechs to do stuff or add things, new use cases to their channels. So generally, there's been huge improvement. I mean, they're not as well positioned as a new neobank or a startup that can kind of do everything from the ground up in the modern way, but there's been huge progress.
Jude, I have had on the show individuals from True Layer, Bamboo in Singapore, who apparently are winning business in broader geographies such as America, Plaid, and maybe a couple others. And certainly the sentiment from everybody is, this is a huge opportunity. Everybody's in a fantastic position to be in this growing market. There's a massive need, and all the business seem to have great traction. Nonetheless, I'm assuming you position yourself unique to all the other competitors in the space. What is that? How do you cut up the landscape? How do you describe what it is that Meniga are doing that's special to you?
Yeah. I think we focus more on the incumbent banks, and but we are still very much part of this open banking, let's call it, movement. And that basically means that there is anyone can build a bank or a banking service. The big tech companies can do it, startups can do it, the neobanks, but also the banks themselves. I think it's the fintechs and neobanks and big tech that are getting most of the headlines. But what is often forgotten is that all the incumbents, which still have most of the trust and usage of mobile banking, they are also working extremely hard to catch up, to copy sometimes what the neobanks are doing, which are now in a way defining what good looks like. And they are rapidly responding and upgrading. So basically our strategy and belief, and I think it's obvious, many of the success cases of open banking, all these new use cases and services that we're seeing, some will happen outside banking, but many will happen inside the digital bank. Yeah. And so we are positioning to and partnering with banks in many different ways to kind of work with them to bring those use cases to bear and capture part of that upside.
What has been their hesitation to trust or enter into open banking standards?
No, I mean, this represents both a threat and opportunity. So I think and these are big organizations, and so the challenge of how to change, become more agile and move is a very big leadership challenge. And but many banks are responding to it in a good way. They're designing new kind of organizational structures. They are kind of doing all sorts of things to be more innovative, more agile. But still, I think if you're a big bank, you shouldn't be super kind of reckless as a startup can be, because you have a lot to lose. I think we've seen them come from the spectrum of being very conservative and slow moving, not fully to the other side of being an agile startup with nothing to lose, but into the middle where they still treat privacy and security as fundamental. But then they, especially on the front end, they kind of open up and try to be more agile. And I think we're seeing extremely interesting early development where the lines are blurring also between banks and fintechs. Like historically, we are used to just consuming our banking services digitally through the bank's mobile or web application. And these products we are consuming are just the bank's products that they have on their balance sheet. But now we are seeing more and more examples of bank thinking about, hang on, maybe we should kind of use our front end, our mobile app, and turn it into a platform where we invite others to also offer their services. We may not need to have all the loans we offer on our own balance sheet. We can invite others, whether it's a fintech or another bank, to kind of compete for our customers' attention. We control their access, and so this evolution, banking interfaces becoming platforms, is an early trend. A great example. One example of this is one of the core use cases we focus on is cashback rewards, which is one of the things driving neobank adoption. So we are in the Nordics focusing there, and we went live with Nordea, the biggest bank in the Nordics, in the spring, in the middle of COVID, with cashback reward service into their mobile banking app. And what's new here, this was the first time that Nordea trusted a third party to basically manage a part of their mobile banking application. So Meniga controls that section fully. Of course, we only do it in a way they would be happy with. But the user just sees this is Nordea's app, this is cashback service. And then as that grows, we split the revenue of that service with the bank. So the bank main motivation is to get a great new service, but it's also a use case that as it grows, it's good for the bank, it's good for Meniga, but it's an example of this platform thinking. Let's invite new use cases into my digital bank.
And as you move forward with that partnership model, so this is big B2B commercials that are being struck, deep partnerships, they're getting your agility, your matrix organization, being able to innovate, disrupt. You're the experts in open banking, the thinking around it. You're getting their balance sheet, huge pool of users, regulatory sway, etc. How do you see it moving forward in terms of what's the ideal amount of partnerships you have? What type of banks would you choose to keep forming partnerships with? Because you could just build into one or two or a few banks into huge epic partnerships, or of course you can try and spread out through them. These are two different strategies. What are you looking to do?
Yeah, I think we are where we have been moving in the past few years is fewer and kind of deeper partnerships with big banking groups. And part of that has been also to take strategic investment. So now 6 of our kind of deepest partners are also investors in Meniga. So we have UniCredit Group that is in 12 countries and one of the biggest banks in Italy. We have BPCE in France, second bank in France. These are investors and also customers that we are kind of partnering with deeply to in a multi-year relationship to upgrade their digital banking. So that's been the trend. But one of the things we are also now doing, in addition to bringing those new use cases into digital banking, is helping them also bring other fintechs into digital banking. Our software handles, for example, consent management. So you can opt in to different services. And through our software, it's easier to integrate new services, and because we can't build them all rather than the bank. So I think the avenue banks are going down here is to be able to integrate whatever service is good for their customers into their digital bank. And there are so many that are now emerging. That's the kind of excitement and opportunity of open banking. There's just so many things that are emerging that are good services.
If we now think of it as a company, so forget externally what it's doing, but in terms of it's somewhere around 100 people, it's 9 years mature, it's had incredibly good investment, and it also now has partners that are reinvesting into it. Company-wise, how do you see this growing? You're the founder, you're thinking in terms of numbers, in 3, 5, 7 years, this could be 1,000-person business. We could be in this many territories or not. But could you paint that picture for us, please?
One of the reasons we've been successful, we have focused on tangible value. We have not been too focused on hype or something that is very pie in the sky, far in the future. So I think that's a balance we always have to strike, while at the same time being a very ambitious company. So now with certain tailwinds, the rise of open banking, the rise of the neobanks that are, and COVID, which if any bank was in doubt that they need to invest in digital, like now with COVID, where in many countries you can't really do banking outside of digital, I mean, then this is all driving investment into and upgrades of digital banking that kind of supports our value proposition. So we are well positioned to grow nicely over the next few years. And I mean, we really just want to build a great company, grow in a healthy, profitable way as a company, and build a company that we can be proud of, that has a meaningful impact. Having impact and doing so through digital banking, eventually helping some people improve their financial behavior was basically one of the key areas of reasons for founding the business. So build a great company, grow. We're very ambitious. We're competitive. This is a very dynamic and competitive market. But we feel we are well positioned to grow strongly on the back of those tailwinds. I think, okay, one outcome is that we grow nicely with our software business, but I think the real opportunity, you can say our unicorn potential, if you will, is that if some of those use cases that we are now helping to bring to market inside digital banking really take off, then we are positioned to grow with them.
Was that the vision? If we now start thinking about you as a recurring founder and clearly a really ambitious individual, and we'll go through it next, but just where we are now, was that the ambition? Did you specifically seek to set up a business that, I mean, the term unicorn or not, was £1 billion plus value, something incredibly sizable? Did you have that type of focus, or it was always just, look, I logically want to do something that has an impact and money wasn't a focus?
No, yes, it was very deliberate. I mean, we are three co-founders, and we had a very clear conversation before starting the business that this is not a lifestyle business. We want to try to grow fast and become a big business. We want to have a big impact. I mean, life is short. This is one of the ways to have an outsized impact in the world, and we're going to try. That's going to be a difficult journey and a roller coaster ride, I really think that unless you try that and focus on growth, it's much hard. Then it's very difficult to get there. It's hard enough if you have that deliberate plan, and that guides a lot of the early decision. That means you build your organization and your product so that it can work in different markets. You think globally from the beginning. I think that one of the benefits of starting it out of a tiny Nordic country like Iceland is that there's no home market to speak of. You have to think outside your home market to begin with.
Your background really starts from my research with computer science at university. What drew you to that field?
Yeah, I was good at math in high school. I was competing in math competitions. This was like in the mid '90s, and the internet was starting. There was just so much happening in the world of technology that choosing computer science or software engineering was what I wanted to do, something really practical. But I had very different ideas then. I imagined myself going into artificial intelligence or something like that. But then, I started my first business still in the last year of computer science.
But if we just stay there for a second, because otherwise, we don't get that chapter in the biography which explains how you started becoming entrepreneurial. You just mentioned you were thinking maybe artificial intelligence. You were naturally drawn to and competent in mathematics, so this all makes sense. What's in the background at the point? Did you have mentors or parents, or from an internal desire perspective, how did you make some of those decisions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it wasn't more complicated that. I mean, there was a lot of things happening in the world. There was, as I said, the internet was young, the dot-com boom was happening. Me and some of my friends in computer science, we were not I had worked for a consulting engineering firm as an intern for the summer. That didn't excite me at all. That felt like old and boring, almost like an accounting firm. So let's try to do something. So we started a business. We didn't know what we were going to do. We just, let's try it. Like we had no idea. And we sent out letters to companies we can program. And a few of them tried to hire us, but we said no, and but didn't want to give us projects. In the end, we built a computer game, which was moderately successful. Then we pivoted into enterprise mobility. And
what was the computer game?
It was called The Time Traveler. It was the highest selling game in Iceland. Wow. It was Christmas of '98, narrowly beating Lara Croft and Tomb Raider at the time. Oh, but wow. That meant 3,500 copies. So it was not something that makes you rich.
But what was it? So Time Traveler, what were you doing in the game? Obviously time traveling, but...
It was an edutainment, so educational game. So it was in the style of Monkey Island or those types of games that were popular at the time, or Grim Fandango that some people may remember. But so you were it's a third-person game. You were put in the shoes of the first Icelandic settler and solving puzzles to make the settlement happen as it happened. And then it took you through 4 different kind of main scenes of Icelandic history, and you learned kind of what happened by solving puzzles and getting through it.
That's really cool. I love the sound of it. Maybe do a second edition. The technology will be very different, but keep the same concept.
We still get requests about that.
It's amazing. And so you and these group of guys, Wiley at that time didn't just go, okay, we'll work for you. You looked at it and thought, well, no, actually, let's set something up ourselves. We've got a tangible in-demand skill set. And as you say, .com was happening. You raised some money, and then what happened?
Yeah, I mean, we were still, to be clear, super naive and overly confident, and but that's also a good thing. Ignorance is bliss. It can be a good thing sometimes when you're starting a company. So yeah, I mean, we felt that the game wasn't serious enough. We had opportunities. We built another game as a contractor, but then we pivoted into enterprise mobility. The mobile internet was supposed to be starting there in 99, 2000. That was a big thing in the Nordics. And we built a product which we called the Vaporizer, which was about turning normal websites into mobile websites. So for WML or WAP, that was the name of that technology that most people have forgotten about now. And it kind of, you could browse in your old Nokia phones. It was horrible user experience, but we had this product that could, in theory, take any website and put it into this. And we struck a big deal with Nokia. That was one of the leading companies of the world at that time. So we actually kind of did pretty well in 2001 too, when the .com bust as a partner to Nokia, and we're part of a really big project on their behalf to try to take on research in motion and kind of mobilize a lot of the enterprise applications at the time. But then in 2003, they decided, okay, they killed the project after spending $100 million working with many technology partners like us, and said, like, this mobile internet is not really going to take off until 2007-8, and the guys that were leading that project at Nokia were kind of lost in the in-house politics. So that's how it ended. And in hindsight, they were right. Mobile internet didn't take off until 2007-8 with the iPhone and Apple. And for us, we had some money in the bank, but we liquidated the company at the time after 5 years. We learned a lifetime of lessons, one of which was that there was a shareholder misalignment and dispute. So once this big project, we lost it, which was our main source of revenue, we decided there wasn't enough appetite to continue working together. And there was a lot of these lessons that I think many entrepreneurs learn. Like, we were friends that started it. We didn't discuss what could happen. And then when that happens, that really tests your friendship and your relationship. And fortunately, I still am friends with my co-founders, but there were some relationship that got broken into this as a consequence of this business. So a lot of lessons there in how not to do things when you set up a business.
I think the typical, but there's many misalignment with founders or teams in business can be, where they're ambition is versus where the risk is, where the risk reward is. Was that what you guys found?
Yeah, I mean, it was when we started it originally, there were 6 founders, 3 of which weren't even ready to start working for the company. They would join maybe later or had did very specific jobs. And some of these were spouses of the founders or siblings of the founders. So, and then when we had some funding and a measure of success, then we figured, okay, it's us 3 founders that are really working on this. We can't have the others as part of it. They had no role anymore, but they didn't feel that was fair. So those conversations were just extremely difficult as it hadn't been discussed in advance. They felt they just should keep their equity. So in every company I've started since, I mean, we discuss this at length. We have a vesting schedule, and very clear conditions. What do you need to do to keep your founding equity, and what do we do if things, because life happens, you could get sick or something else could happen. So you need to discuss in advance what do we do if something comes up.
Yeah, great advice. And from that moment, is that when you then pursue going to take an MBA, or is there's another stint in between?
Yeah, no, I think what changed for me during this starting Diamond Software and kind of running it for 5 years, mainly in a technical role, I really realized that kind of while we had world-class tech people, we had the elite of Iceland software engineers at the time, but we sucked in sales and marketing. I think we were lucky to get our sales and contract, and so I just understood that's more important. And I got more passionate about business models and entrepreneurship than technology. So I wanted to educate myself more, and I figured an MBA would be a kind of good next step. But in the meantime, I took a job as head of sales for another software company with the sole purpose of learning to sell. And that was one of the best decisions I've made. So I was a traveling salesman, mostly in the US, going to almost every state, selling very specialized software for.
What's the tip, the advice, what you learned from that experience of selling? What's the number one thing that helped?
I mean, that's one of my number one advice to all entrepreneurs, and even beyond that is learn how to sell. And I mean that in a very broad way. I mean, selling is just kind of conveying ideas. And like when you start a business, it's all about selling. First, you have to sell it to yourself, then to your co-founders, then to customers or prospects or investors or new employees. You're always fighting for talent. So selling, the reason why this is important and why this is a good idea is, or why the product works is key. So that's, I think, one of the, in almost any setting. So that's one of the, as I said, probably the best decision I ever made in my career.
And then when you went and took the MBA, you were there for a year or two?
2 years.
A couple of years. Would you recommend to anybody in the audience considering founding a business to take an MBA?
Yeah, I think it's not obvious that's always a good idea, but I think, yeah, for me, it worked really well. I mean, it's a privilege to be at school, especially if I had gone through these startup experiences. I had some lessons to share so I could contribute, but I was also eager to learn more and kind of acquire a broader skill set. So, and entrepreneurship is about, you need a very broad skill set. You can specialize in some things, but you need to know something about everything as well. So
having started a business, understanding about the importance of getting a balance in your founding team being aligned, then understanding the value of sales, of which, as you say, is succinct communication and a number of other things. What did the MBA actually value-wise add to you as a professional?
No, and I mean, I think also being in a top-tier school like Harvard Business School is a privilege. I mean, I believe I got in as a kind of selling a combination of, I'm a kind of deep tech guy, but also a sales guy. That was maybe a relatively rare combination. And then, I mean, you're surrounded with kind of really ambitious, impressive people from all over the world that are, and that's a great kind of experience to go through. it feels like it's the center of the world. Like this is the level of intelligence or competence or excellence is so high that that just reminds you to kind of not compromise too much and bring that then into the wider world when you come out. And so that's a real privilege to go through that. But for me, it was mostly just a personal growth experience. So even if I was not doing entrepreneurship or was not really acquiring those skills for a specific purpose in that sense, just to grow personally, invest in myself, and that's that felt like a privileged and good thing to do.
And you talk about personal development, personal growth, and this is of course something that you can speak to as a serial entrepreneur, someone who's founded and set up a successful culture. There's always in parallel, high levels of stress when you sit in that seat, and you have to look at how you draw a line to personally manage this. And this is something that's very complex to start with and can always be, and some people are better at it than others. How have you found that? What are some of the tips and techniques you have? And perhaps if you could give us some color of, Georg outside of work.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. I mean, yeah, being a founder CEO is a very, it's a difficult job. That's another thing I make sure I explain to those contemplating entrepreneurship. And there is some glamour in it, but like 99% is just hard work and most of all, really stressful. Even the most successful startup has ups and downs and an emotional roller coaster ride. It's a story of rejections and challenges and problems and all sorts of things. So managing your stress and your mental state through this is completely instrumental. And no, I think and there are so a few things. I mean, setting boundaries. That's number one. That's also what I tell all my kind of leadership team. You have to set the boundaries. It's so easy to get drowned. It's like you're drinking from a fire hose. You really have to learn how to do it. Otherwise, you'll just get killed. So you and for me, for example, that means no matter how busy things are, I mean I would not work on Saturdays and ideally not on Sundays too, but sometimes I do that. And very clear boundaries. I mean, I have 3 kids and a family, so I really make sure that I prioritize time there. And I mean, in the early years of Meniga, that was super hard work. I divorced my ex-partner, and that was complicated like all divorces. But I think one of the contributing factors was how much I was working, and I mean, couldn't have seen it any other way. I was so also passionate about my business, and but it's also so very kind of strong personal lessons in that. Yeah, this is difficult. Balancing these things is not easy, and so now I'm in a new relationship and have another kid, and so I'm even more strict than before to set those boundaries clear, and so I think that's fair. I give my business still most of my energy, but maybe 2/3, but 1/3 is reserved for my family and other interests, and I have many interests. I'm a history buff. I watch sports when I can. I used to play competitive football until I was 21, and so I still watch the Premier League and the Icelandic League and play football once or twice a week, which is essential for me. Running, that's another thing. That's my meditation. I usually run 3 or 4 times a week, and just staying in shape and thinking about things, reflecting while running is an essential part of staying sane with all the stresses that comes with it.
I think God, it's such a hard thing to get right, and it's like I kind of think of a kid playing a computer game, and the kid who could win the game, beat the big boss first, could just sit there 24 hours and play the game. And then what's really left apart from completing the game? there's not a rounded individual there, right? And then the person on the other extreme, just cruises in and out of the game and is never going to be any good. And so the really tricky thing is that at some point around 18 to 25, the real true thoroughbred entrepreneurs who just can't think of doing anything else apart from being excited about cracking on, thrust themselves into this game. And you get a lot of people who perception-wise, visually are incredibly successful because their, in this instance, toy has gone, up as quickly as possible. But then their personal life can completely be forgotten. And I think, listen, some people at different stages have commercial maturity, the ability to balance, the outside effects of their personal life. But pretty much nobody gets it all right in one order. This either, you have career success earlier on, or you have personal success earlier on. But I think that this is what you see when somebody's had a few companies. They've had a couple of decades to balance everything out, and they're having tremendous success along the way. Is you start to realize, okay, what's really important are these controls. My Saturday is sacred. I love spending a third of my time with family. Running's really important to me because it allows me to distress. Feel like I'm healthy as well, which is obviously maybe even the most important thing. It's so challenging, isn't it? And you're completely right. If anybody's talking about, should I set a business up? Should I be a founder? Then actually these things are maybe the things to think about more than whatever great idea it is that you have. Because the idea, as we know, is important, but it's a percent of what's actually going to make this thing get traction and be successful over a 10, 15-year journey, which is what it takes to drive proper innovation through and have a team that scales and develop a good culture whilst having a good time along the way yourself and making it work for you. And I think a lot of people in the last 10 years have romanticized entrepreneurship and venture capital raises and not really thought, this is such a hard decision that I need to pay credence to. So it's really...
I mean, this question is something I've been obsessed about for a long time, and I think it goes beyond entrepreneurship. I mean, again, when I'm studying at Harvard, I mean, you meet so many really impressive people that are kind of super talented, super hardworking, ambitious, kind, humble, that can kind of do anything. And I know too many examples, at least from my perspective, where they can completely immerse themselves in works, partly because of their ambition, partly because of the high level of competition at the highest level, which certainly exists. And then 10, 15, 20 years later, their identity is fully merged with their work, and there's nothing left or very little left, or they forgot about other things. And I think that's an extremely, at least from my perspective, very sad thing. So I'm obsessed about not being that person, while at the same time I am competitive. I know I need to work super hard. So getting that at least some semblance of balance is critical here, and keeping perspective. Like, it's about not just about building the business. It's about the day-to-day partly, but it has to be about the journey. But it's also about you're trying to be a role model. You're trying to kind of have an impact in the world, and it's just part of this broader question of what finding purpose and happiness. And I think
that's completely right.
And I mean, I don't have the answer, but I know it lies somewhere. I mean, on one hand, you have one extreme where people just focus on the day-to-day, live life as now, and no long-term, deeper project like writing a book or starting a business or something much smaller but still long-term. Then I think that life gets kind of fairly shallow fairly quickly if you're only doing short-term things. But if you kind of completely lose yourself in the long-term project and don't think about the day-to-day small things in life, then you're also that's also very hollow. So somewhere in between is the answer, and trying to pursue both that's the constant challenge.
Yeah. So this is really what resonates with me, and you just said the word obsessed. So I mean, I'll come along with that one as well. I'm definitely obsessed about this. As I've said to the audience many times, ad nauseum read biographies. I'm very interested in history but I'm also very interested in business leaders. And it's not a search to try and find the business leaders who are number one on the scoreboard, because often those individuals have gone too far where the focus is just the legacy of the business. Is to try and find the individuals who've found the balance of having, wellness across everything. And like you said, it's a really good way to put it. You've got to have the long-term ambition, but you've got to be present in the current moment as well. Otherwise, what's the point? And actually, I think that's part of the reason that we're doing this show, is I think a lot of the people who get written about aren't going to have that balance because they've got such a crazy extreme record for them to be prominent in a given sector and, worth numerous billions of pounds, that those guys are actually the ones too extreme. I think that's what's so brilliant about some of the guests and you on this show, is that that's the kind of top middle level of entrepreneurs who might be able to find the balance. And, will we in 100 years be remembered for our business? Well, maybe, but is that the most important thing? I'm not so sure. I think the most important thing is you do something with purpose, you enjoy the journey, you're proud of it, and the market moves forward.
Yeah, and I think it's also dangerous that if your identity is too married to your business, then like if it fails or then I think that's just a devastating blow. So I'm very mindful that yes, my business is a big part of my identity, but that's not me. That's my business, and then I have all sorts of other things in life that have nothing to do with the business.
With just this final point on the searching for mana, what your purpose is, and so on and so forth. If you were to look back through the arc of your career, what would you say that is? What would you say has been the thing that's allowed you to have all this success?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm not sure I can put one word or a phrase to that. I think it's several things that come together. I think it's partly it's competitiveness. I like the challenge of building a business. It is a big challenge. I think that a lot of things have to come together. You have to be skilled. You have to have the timing right. So luck is involved as well, and there are 100 things that could derail it. And it's so that it is, I think, one of the key challenges that you can take on trying to build a successful business. And some, I don't know, maybe sometimes I feel that's mistaken, but some believe that sharpens your character, is a growth journey to go through such a challenge. And I'm sure it has, but also there have been very difficult times. That's the side of entrepreneurship that is not talked about. But I mean, every single kind of leader of a high growth company has gone through very difficult times. That's just a fact. That's how it works.
We've discussed open banking. We've discussed COVID having escalated the incumbents into fully embracing digital. This positions Meniga well, but for now, let's forget Meniga. How do you see 2021's landscape? What is it that you're looking at as being really exciting trends?
No, I mean, COVID and what impact that is having and what opportunities that's creating and how that's changing the world, I think is very, very close to mind. That affects our business and industry, but also I think other businesses. And I know you are very interested in culture and motivating your employees. So I think that is something that is now very big on my mind, because now we have 4 main offices: London, Warsaw, Stockholm, and Reykjavik. And so we are used to working remotely, but now most of them are closed and or some are optional, but mostly working from home. And some of my team is thriving in these kind of conditions. They like it. They probably can do it in the long run, but others really miss the coming to work, the camaraderie, the social aspect. Also, a big question is on the kind of building relationship with customers and partners. Like, now everything's remote, so not meeting them for dinner afterwards, building that deeper relationship. It's very much. I'm very much uncertain what will that kind of make sales more difficult. Probably it will. So I think, how can we, with technology or tools, kind of get some of that social connection back remotely. I think we can do better than just Zoom. Zoom feels that's an improvement over seeing the person, but a lot of people don't. I mean, we're social animals. We really care for that kind of deeper connection, and I think some of that is now lost. So that would be a very interesting area for me. How can and I think there are business opportunities there. How can we kind of change our video conferencing or whatever tools to kind of get some of that social feeling, kind of amplify that more? Probably we can never get to the point like we're in the same room, but we can do better. I think that's a very big pertinent challenge now that a lot of companies are facing.
I think on the latter point, as somebody who has spent 15 years in some instances building and actually maintaining and developing relationships on originally phone calls, not even video calls, you can take yourself to a place where you do genuinely feel like you're achieving somewhere around 90% of the relationship you might over a coffee anyway. So I think there's a tranche of people who haven't got that experience of doing that and being comfortable with asking personal questions and building rapport and expressing humor. And I think so these people may well learn that skill set because a lot of people are going to be forced to do that. And then I think that on the first part, and by the way, tools obviously can help with that. And then I think on the first part, what probably will happen in the short term is those serendipitous water cooler meetings unfortunately don't happen as much. So if you have existing relationships in play, okay, that's fine. But where are the new outlier relationships going to come from? So I think that unfortunately is going to be tougher to form. It's incredibly hard to do that, by reaching out to somebody on a LinkedIn or emailing them and then having a Zoom call. It's quite formal, isn't it? Unless you have a long format podcast like we're having here, where people slightly open up and you get to know somebody. So I don't know, maybe there's a few things like people have to start having longer calls. So randomness comes out of it. And like you say, there'll be there is a load of innovation on how tools can help. But I think we have in the short term COVID where we're forced mostly to be remote. And then I think what will happen in 2021, which will be really interesting, even if businesses have decided, okay, certain offices now won't return to those offices, it will be crucial to build in people in workforces going for coffees with each other, client relationships, doing the same, dinner, coffees. And so you might have this situation where a predominant amount of your working week is remote, is productive on tools, but then breakout sessions where you make sure you have that human interaction. Because like you say, forget productivity, we crave it. We just enjoy doing that. And I think that the businesses that are too binary and look at just purely cash flow and go, okay, we can save on office expenditure here and my guys are working hard, there'll be an underlying detriment to that culture in a lot of the cases. The good news is most business leaders, and of course, most that I speak to are very digital and technology focused, I think aren't going to try and just go extreme, we're a remote workforce. They're going to have some type of balance. So yeah, for sure, that's something that we're trying to do some research and help out on, and give some advice on to the market as we move forward. But of course, we don't know yet because there's not enough feedback loops that have come into us.
No, it's not an easy problem to solve also, but everyone's in the same boat kind of now, but I think, this is very interesting. And I think there are long-term detriments or problems that and we see some groups of our employees that we're more worried about. And you can do some of it by communicating more than usual. And but some elements of the culture is really hard to replicate remotely. So that's big on my mind.
You just mentioned the different territories that you're in. How are those cut up? What are the different pockets of skill sets?
Yeah, so we started in the Nordics in Iceland, but then we moved our headquarters to London and built our sales force there. So we are very much a part of the London FinTech scene. I think that's been a common model for some European companies. They're drawn to London because it's the FinTech capital. So, but they keep their core R&D and product elsewhere, and that was based on our relationships and network in that location. Since then, I mean, Iceland has world-class software people, but it's a tiny talent pool, so you can only grow so much there. So some years ago, we kind of looked for other regions, and we decided on Warsaw for where we are now doing most of our kind of growth in terms of tech hiring. It has a great kind of quality and deep talent pool. So we've been very kind of successful with that decision. But and then also we have a substantial office in Stockholm where we used to have our sales, and where we acquired a Swedish company 2 years ago. So we have a substantial office there, and that being in 4 locations is puts a lot of also challenges on the business to keep some of the culture aligned and communicate effectively. I think it's the miracle of modern technology and kind of that we can build an international business like this, but it's certainly, you have to manage it very carefully.
I think like you never can as an entrepreneur make purely selfish decisions, but you can slightly influence the decision based on a personal appetite. And I really love having different types of clients and businesses in different locations. And so we're working with our development team in Warsaw as well. And my partner is originally from there. So we're traveling there a lot, and we started sizing up Poznan, Bucharest, or Warsaw as where we'd grow our dev team. And we ended up proceeding with Warsaw a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love it there. It is amazing. I mean, firstly, that community has just the best computer science and mathematical education system. So the bar is so high. From a commercial perspective, albeit it's getting a lot higher, the salaries are lower compared to if you look at Paris, Germany, UK, etc. So that's a slight opportunity. As mentioned, it's changing because their economy is doing really well. But what I also find, and this is the thing I really love, is it's almost like 10 years ago in London. So the vibe about startups there is just so infectious. Whereas I think in London, it still is in the right pockets. But the talent in London knows its value and plays off like each company with each other. And there's always negotiations at the end of an offer extended to a candidate base. Whereas I think in Eastern Europe, you've still got a bit more kind of pureness with people are really genuinely buying the company for the purpose, the mission, the buzz. And so I'm absolutely loving it there. I'd recommend anyone in the audience who's just thinking in 2021, when we can travel again, where I might go, Warsaw, go there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, let me kind of second that. I mean, that's absolutely my impression as well. You often have this stereotypical view of kind of the Eastern European cities might be gray or boring, but I think Warsaw is so vibrant. It's one of the greenest cities in Europe. It's lovely parks and a great tech and entrepreneurial scene, and really this growth mentality that is harder to find in Europe these days. You find that in Asia, but yeah, Warsaw is highly recommended.
Georg Ludviksson,